Hello, and welcome to the BOFIN Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to the BOFIN Buzz. And I am delighted to welcome into the studio today Charles Paynter, who is a BOFIN member, one of our most enthused and engaged BOFIN members. There aren't many projects that Charles isn't involved in. So lovely to see you here. Charles, how are you today?
Very well, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, would you, Charles, would you like to just sort of briefly introduce yourself just say a couple of words about your farm, where you farm, what sort of farm it is?
Okay, yes. So we farm in North Bedfordshire. It's an arable farm. We're third generation farmers there. It's 220 odd hectares. We used to have a little bit more, but family politics ruled that out a long time ago. My grandfather moved up from Hampshire because of same old story, pests and diseases. This time it was rabbits. So he moved the whole farm up by train, and he rented land in this area, which at the time was lying idle. This is in between the wars. A lot of land in this area was actually scrub and bushes, had been abandoned. So he took over the rent of this farm and a neighbouring farm for peppercorn rent. And we've been here ever since. And he practiced what was known in the day as dog and stick farming, where you sort of lived off the resources that you had. But slowly the farm evolved. The war was a big influence to the type of farming. So it was a very mixed farm, traditional, just about every conceivable type of crop and animal enterprise, feeding into the local communities. And during the war, milk and stuff was taken into Bedford Railway Station and transported by train into London. My grandfather was quite a clever gentleman at the time, and so he got involved with things like flax for the war supplies. So he was able to mend or work the new type of harvesters that were being imported and understand how they worked and made them run. So he got heavily involved in that during the war. So we've been doing that, and we've always had this sort of fix things ourselves approach, and we've made a lot of equipment for ourselves over the years. So that's been our story, and we've been arable farming, with a modern trend. So the animals sort of died out after the wartime, but we did have a small dairy farm here for a while that my aunt run until she retired. And now we have no animals, but I rather wish we had more animals because of soil health and things. So,
well, maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. And I was going to ask you, Charles, if you'd just like to, if there were three key things that you want to get right on your farm, or perhaps you already have got those right, you've already achieved them, perhaps. What do you think they would be?
Well, I've got three preoccupations currently. I think number one would be weeds, pests and diseases, particularly for the pests, slugs and snails. I think any arable farmer knows how much they're costing us on an ongoing basis, and the loss of control that we've had, and probably making the situation worse with ourselves for the type of rotation we've had. And then the other really big problem for us is blackgrass. And cabbage stem flea beetle has basically taken us out of oilseed rape with any kind of certainty. It's very much a Cinderella crop, and we hardly grow it now.
Yeah.
Then the other thing that I'm particularly interested in is the whole regenerative approach to farming, with the loss of inputs, like chemicals and things like that, the cost of fertilizers, etc. Understanding soil biology, the soil microbiome is, I think, the key to the future of farming for us. And I think there's going to be a new age of farming, which is already being practiced by people you already know, where they're able to maintain efficient farming practices, but cut back on resources and things that we really shouldn't be using, like natural gas to make nitrogen, some of the more harmful chemicals, which we're finding now having longer-term effects on the environment and ourselves.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in a bit. What's the third one?
The third one is really following on with from regenerative idea is developing a sustainable, balanced farming, probably more akin to the way that we used to do it, and that's, I think, will allow us to enhance and utilise the natural capital of our farms rather than being so heavily dependent on outside resources, which are not so sustainable anymore.
Right. No, fantastic. Well, that's, I mean, certainly there's one or two topics in there that I know that we share an interest in, particularly slugs and grass weeds. So let's talk about those in a bit. But first of all, you talked about your farm earlier on. I mean, what about yourself, Charles? I mean, why did you get into farming? Was it just the natural progression, or have you always had an interest in it? What drew you into it?
I think it's natural progression, and I think I was one of the many people in this country or farmers born into it. It's sort of in your blood. I mean, I can remember being involved in farming from a very early age. As soon as I was able to lift things, climb on things, use them, drive things, I was on them, and I was part of the harvesting team from my teens, early teens, and by the time I was 15 or 16, I was fully integrated into the summer holiday regime, and I absolutely loved it. I always have done. I think, like most farmers, it's an enormously rewarding experience and equips you for all sorts of things in life, resilience and things like that. The ability to think positively and look at any problem as just a solution waiting for you to find it. So I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I mean, I think there are a lot of, but certainly that there's resonance there with why I went into farming. I'm sure a lot of the listeners would say the same as well. But moving to your first point, because as I say, we share a real interest in it. Just remind us what it is that your first sort of big thing that you're looking to get right.
Really, the slugs and snails and blackgrass, and those are the two big ones. Cabbage stem flea beetle. I think we already understand that that's probably a rotational issue.
Yeah. Now, you've been involved in Slimers, which is a big project that we've been running since June. So this is strategies leading to improved management and enhanced resilience against slugs. It's a 3-year program, DEFRA funded £2.6 million program, and we've got there's 6 partners involved in it, who are CHAP, Harper Adams University, Joanna Centre, Aggravation, and Small Robot Company, and generously funded, as I say, by DEFRA. So what we're looking to do in this project is bring to market 2 new services. Firstly, around patch location forecasting, and some of the work that Keith Walters at Harper Adams University has been doing, looking at relating where slugs gather to patches in your fields. And then there's also autonomous, an autonomous thing where robots will be going, finding slugs and treating them with nematodes that we're also going to be bringing on in the project. But now you've been very much involved in our first year of farm trials. You're one of our 27 slug sleuths who has been monitoring an area in their field with traps. So do you want to just describe to us, Charles, the setup that you had within your trial?
Okay, so it's a hectare plot in a field of wheat. I've tried to include a couple of different soil types, although we're predominantly a certain sort of clay. There's definitely areas where it's got more topsoil or it's a bit lighter. So I tried to include that, and there's 100 different traps there. And integrated within that area, in between the slug traps, are also beetle. There's less of them, but beetle traps as well. So whilst we're monitoring slugs, we're also linking it to beetle activity if possible.
That's right. Yeah, and it was so Clive Blacker from Aggravation, I think, came out
Yeah.
to lay out the traps, didn't he? It was 100 traps that you've got, 100 slug traps, and then there's 20 beetle traps that you've been monitoring as well.
Yeah.
So now, how's that gone, Charles? Because it's not been the easiest of autumn winters to do. I think you had to go out there a minimum of 5 times,
So, yes.
and 100 traps plus 20 beetle traps. What was it like, gathering the data from these?
It's okay. It's like all things, you get better at it the more you do at it. And the first time you go out, it's all a bit fingers and thumbs and mud on things, and losing your pen and dropping water
Yeah.
on things and not quite remembering one thing and learning how to use the app. But it's actually quite straightforward. And once you get going on it, you get efficient. We've been lucky this year in as much as although it's been a wet autumn, we actually got our crops in sown earlier and in okay conditions. And we've been in this little area here, literally not very large area. We actually had sort of reasonable amounts of rainfall through the autumn, so I was able to carry on, especially early autumn after sowing. I was able to carry out the trials, just dodging windy weather, frosty weather, and wet weather, really. And so we were fortunate compared to many other parts of the country where they've had the most appalling situation. We were lucky, and through the peak period, which is the sort of October November time, I was able to sort of do what I needed to do, and I found it okay. I mean, the data will tell the story how it's all gone, but I did get better at it, and I got better at taking photos. The other thing I did find was keeping one hand clean, realizing how much battery life you use taking lots of photographs and things like that. But once I realized, I made sure I went out with a fully charged phone and things like that. So
and thank you very much. So you've been using the Husk app, I think, to record your data.
Yes.
And the great thing about that is that we've got all your data has come through, which is fantastic. And thank you very much, by the way, for recording it all. A really sort of fantastic data set. I have to say, it's all just numbers to me. It's Keith who's going to be doing the analysis. So although I've got your data, I can't tell you anything about it.
No.
I mean, what was your impression as you went around? Did you get an idea? Because the whole idea of this is that we're supposed to be finding out. Keith is pretty insistent. It's years of research he's put into this, and he knows that they do gather in patches. And really, what this trial is about is trying to. He calls it refining the edges in terms of where the edges of the patches are. But did you notice as you went round that it did vary, and perhaps you were seeing a pattern develop as you went round the traps?
Yes, there's definitely an area within the thing where I always found higher slug numbers. I found there was a weather effect. If it had been cold prior to that, like early frost, things could be different. I did also have a little bit of problem at the start till I overcame the problem of the local rook community.
Oh, right.
Would come round periodically, and they just go through the whole area, and they learnt to turn the lids over. They're so inquisitive, and of course they were fetching the slugs or whatever they found off them. So it was. I know Keith was quite insistent that you should have the right kind of pressure on the things on the lids, but it really just needed some. If you had small stones, they could fetch them off and then turn the lid over. So you needed larger stones or a stone that they couldn't. But once they got over the novelty factor, they didn't. Then it come back at it. They left them alone, and then I could see patterns emerging. But I definitely found one area of to my eye, seemed to have. I always felt there was going to be slugs there, and I had to be fair. I had experience of this area on the farm.
Yeah.
So it kind of matched in. I mean, I think most
Right.
farmers know where their sluggy areas. I've certainly got them on my farm where I always head to first if I want to check slugs, because I know they give me the early warning signs of slugs. You know.
And did you get any damage in your crop?
Yes, I did. So I applied slug bait at drilling. We've got a drill
Yeah.
that will apply slug bait, and I applied then 10 day others about a week later. It's sort of fairly standard procedure that most farmers find they have to use. And then I held my breath
Right.
because I wanted to have slugs on the trial, but obviously I didn't want crop damage.
No.
So I sort of held my breath and used my experience, such as it is, and I did have damage, but I was on the point of thinking, in a minute I might have to do something. This is starting to get serious. You know, that sort of frothy look you get, and you can see raggedy edges. But it held, and so I didn't apply, and I'm glad I didn't, because the crop had a good spell of growth during the latter end of December and the warm weather. Put on another leaf or so and till it a bit, and it looked completely all right, and I'm very happy with it now. It's an average wheat crop that'll be
Well,
okay.
that's really interesting, actually, because would you say that the focus that you had on your field because of this trial perhaps influenced how you managed it from a slug point of view?
Definitely. What I've learned from all the slug trials that you run, well, the both of them I've been
Yeah.
involved in, it definitely focuses you in a much more refined scale. You start really looking, in detail at what you're doing, and
Mm.
what's there. And the beetle's the same. I mean, the life that's in your soil is just incredible. And I mean, I'm probably guilty of this worse than anybody, but over the years I've worked on other farms, and you cover a lot of area, and you've got a lot going on, and you tend to be looking at things. You drive up in a vehicle, you walk out, do your W section, or not even that, and then climb back in your vehicle and off, and it's something out of a can. Whereas this is, I've had to spend time. I spend a lot more time in my field. It's one of the sort of my self-imposed missions now. Is I'm
Mm.
virtually out every day, and I'm walking. I don't have huge area, but I'm walking my fields regularly, and I'm really trying to connect with the soil, what's going on in there, and understand it. And the Slimus trial and the other slug work has really opened my eyes to the level of detail that you really need to put in. And then like anything, whether it's wildlife, your livestock, you start to understand. I mean, this is what we do as farmers. We read the environment that we're working in, and we work out what we need to do. We're not scientists, but we come to conclusions, and we test things. Every day is a school day for us, and that's the way we operate. And we see things, we have ideas, we adapt, and we move on. And this has certainly opened my eyes to the much greater detail we need to be looking at our soils, and the sort of the micro environment that we have.
That's really good to hear, Charles. And you mentioned about the beetle traps as well, which we haven't talked about yet. I mean, what were your sort of findings as far as that's concerned?
Well, it's fascinating. I think there was so much going on. I wouldn't like to say I drew any sort of profound conclusions from anything. I think there's just a lot of insect life, and I rather suspect that the interactions in the soil universe, which it is, are myriad.
Yeah.
I think it's just breathtaking what's going on. If you go from the larger, mice and things right the way down through, there's all sorts of subtle interactions there, all sorts of things. There's niches for a wide variety of insects. I found, things like spiders.
Right.
Some of my traps were infested with spiders quite a lot of the time. Why was that? I don't know. And I mean, they were in the soil. Clearly, they weren't out on plants. They were in the soil, and they were there for a reason. Everything's there for a reason, you know. And
Well, so it sort of
that's
opened your eyes. It opened your eyes to the wildlife that's in your fields, in your soils, that perhaps you just didn't know
no,
existed.
no, it's the scale and complexity of it. I
Yeah.
think, you know, we really do need to start looking, giving this far more credence, put far more research into this. And if I had a magic wand, it would be to pile millions of pounds into this, into world agriculture, to look at the microbiome, the whole
Mm.
world there, because it's doing stuff for us. You know, we
Yeah.
think we're farmers, we just skim around on the surface.
Well,
It's doing stuff.
I sincerely hope this is one of the things that we want to learn from the project. And in fact, the interesting thing about this beetle study is that it was instigated by farmers within the project. It was
Yeah,
something that came from our trial that we were doing last year into. So when I say last year, autumn 2022, into slug-resistant wheat. And the farmers involved in that noticed we didn't get any slugs in that trial because it was a very dry year, if you remember. But we did get a lot of beetles.
yeah,
And it was the farmers involved in that said, you know, there's a lot more beetle activity here than I thought.
yeah,
Let's look at
yeah,
that, which is
yeah,
why we introduced the beetle element. And what we're hoping, and we'll see what the data what data comes through from this, but it would be nice to correlate the beetle populations with the slug populations and see if there's any relationship between them. Because if the beetles are doing a job, well, we know they do a job. These carabid beetles do a job against slugs. What we don't know is just how significant that job is, and also we don't know what we're doing to affect the beetle population in terms
right.
of. Did you apply pyrethroids, by the way, or autumn pyrethroids?
I used to. I've stopped mainly because they just don't work. Well, not against anything that I'm trying to control properly, and of course they have an ongoing, pretty devastating effect on the environment. I mean, well, that's my opinion. I just think
Yeah.
it's a backward step. I mean, we know from various farmers who are, you know, using wildlife friendly measures that they can, for instance, if you've got strips in horsey rape, you don't have cabbage stem flea beetle issues like, you know, and other
Mm.
pests. So uh, it's not got the certainty of something out of a can, but we know we're losing something out of the
Yeah.
can increasingly. So we've got to start looking at this, even if we don't understand it. If we start looking at it and joining the dots, we can at least farm with it. And on the subject of carabid beetles, I mean, I'd no idea that what's this 360 sort species of carabid beetles.
Yes.
And actually, arable farming you know, in the centre of a field, you'll find more of certain sorts of carabid beetles, and you won't find them in the margins. So we tend to think that, you know, the middle of the fields are sterile and the margins are where it's at as regards beetles and things, but not necessarily so. And just going
Mm.
back to my other interests, you know, about things like soil biodiversity, our own biodiversity, gut biomes, we're finding out that there isn't sort of,
Mm.
it's not black and white, it's a series of interrelated cause and effect things which are extremely complex and
Yeah, well,
extremely
we'll come
varied.
back to that in a minute, Charles, because before we move off weed pests and diseases that you're talking about, another project that you've been involved in is the Harvest Weed Seed Control project. And now the part of this is about looking at non-chemical control of grass weeds. The what we're doing here is we're looking at a unit, a seed control unit that goes on the back of a combine. And it takes the chaff stream, including the weed seeds, beats them up and basically makes them unviable. We know that the seed that goes into them, what comes out the back, you know, there's 98% control of the weed seed that comes out the back, that they're 98% unviable. But what we don't know is what's going in, because we don't know how much weed seed has been standing at harvest. Now, the great thing about this is that if it is an effective form of control, it's completely non-chemical. It's a different area of cultural control, you know, at harvest than we've perhaps looked at previously. So now we've got 4 units on BOFIN. So there are 4 BOFIN members who've got units on their farm, and they're testing them. They have been testing them, but we also sent the word out to BOFIN members to become seed scouts, and asked them to sample their weed seed, their weeds, their grass weeds, and send back the results. And you very kindly stepped up to the mark, Todd. By the way, apologies. I think there was a mix-up at our end. That you requested a pack, we sent it out, and I think there was something that went wrong because you never received it, unfortunately. Or it came too late, I think, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a difficult year. I think other people reported that it sort of all happened at once, and we didn't have the sort of the timeline to do what we needed to do because it's quite quick.
Yeah.
Catching the seed before harvest, you actually, another thing you need to get your eye, and with like all these things, there's a wrinkle to all of these things, you know, to get it right.
Did you have a look before harvest to see roughly how much?
Yeah, so I noticed that certain sorts of clumps of areas of, I don't know quite why it would be, but they shed off early. Some plants would have a mixture, and some seem to hold on.
And this is blackgrass we're talking about specifically.
In particular, I don't have a ryegrass problem currently, so blackgrass is my major preoccupation, and I mean the cost to that for our farm is considerable. You know, I mean, one of the main things it does is it changes your cropping, and you end up with more spring sown crops, and you have the commensurate change in your profitability.
So no, but what I have got here are the results, Charles, and you know, apologies, they don't include your results, but they do include the results from the 26 samples that we received in. So just to start off with blackgrass, we had an average of about 27% of seed still retained in the head for the blackgrass, which was I don't know. I mean, I think that's slightly higher than one would expect. It did range from nothing at all. There was a lot of empty heads when it came to harvest, and some that were held up to over 200 seeds per head. Actually, 200 seeds per head of blackgrass, that's per head. And if you think about how blackgrass tillers as well, you just think about how much seed that's shedding on the So 27%, is that, do you think that's roughly what you would expect, Charles?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, I had walked about. I mean, I obviously was looking at my crops at that stage, and I was interested to see how much had been shed, with the trial going on. Obviously, I was thinking about it, so I would say that's ballpark, definitely.
Yeah, the figure for Italian ryegrass was more like 53%, 54%, I think it was, for Italian ryegrass. It retains its head. Now, previous work has suggested that that figure is usually higher. And I don't know whether it was the year or the great number of samples we got through, but Will Smith from NIAB, who was carrying out the analysis, thought that figure was going to be higher. But I mean, again, there was a range from naught through to almost 150 per head, seeds per head in there. Meadow brome, slightly higher, and I think that figure for meadow brome was 61% retained in the year. So, and again, that ranged from about 25 seeds per head up to, again, almost 200. So, if you've got a meadow brome problem, again, that's going to be shedding a lot of seed into your onto your soil. But the advantage with meadow brome is that from the point of view of this project anyway, is that there's a lot more still in the head at harvest that you can intercept with one of these controls. And then sterile brome, again, that ranged from nothing through to about 125 per head. We didn't have very many sterile brome samples sent in, so caution on the data here. But that was about 47% retained on average. Wild oats, very little indeed. Wild oats always look as though they've got more seeds than they actually have. But if you inspect them, you'll find that most of those are empty. Only about 5 to 10%, I think, of wild oats. Again, low data on that, so unreliable. But quite an interesting project, and the hope is that we're going to take on this work into a larger project. We're looking to get a consortium together on a larger grassweed problem called GRASS, Grassweed Resilience Alternative Strategies Platform. And if we can get funding, we're trying to bring together a consortium of companies and research organizations to really tackle grass weeds as an issue. We are very, very reliant on grass weeds. We've actually been doing a survey of our farmers, and you very, very kindly helped us with this, Charles, looking at just how reliant we are on chemistry to do it. Now, and I think so. We asked you the question: how much of your grassweed control? Hang on a second. I've got the actual data for the actual question we asked. Bear with me a second. So, how much of the grassweed control that you use is non-chemical? And you said about more than 80% was what.
Yeah. I mean, really, if you're talking about control, it's rotation, alternative crops. I mean, I have a field that is that I could rightfully say this autumn was blackgrass free. It previously had a reasonable population, and an area of it was quite a bad population. And the way around that was to grow other crops.
Yeah.
Grow. Some people grow forage. I was growing a range of spring crops. I even grew millet, which was a bit of a disaster from the point of view of trying to harvest it in the year. But so I took a large financial hit over that time, growing different crops, so back to back like pulses and then and things. So I took the cereals. Certainly there was no winter cropping for about 4 years, and we took absolutely every opportunity to do whatever we could to control blackgrass. And you can do it, but it's expensive, extremely expensive. If you take on all the knock-on effects, loss of yield, etc. For us, I've been working against this for some time, and last year it really came to a head. I mean, not just me, the whole area around here was fields and fields gone, more or less brown with blackgrass. And
I mean, I think the figures nationally are something like 0.4 billion pounds a year. Blackgrass costs us a million tons wiped off the national harvest because of blackgrass. It is a massive problem that we really cannot underestimate.
Well, I remember using Massey Ferguson some years ago with the initial yield monitoring technology, and I used to share the combine with my neighbour. And when it came time to do his farm, I used to drive the combine. He corn carted into his own store, and he's always had fairly healthy population of blackgrass, despite his best efforts. But it was a real eye-opener. I mean, it could be in a 10-ton crop of wheat, and you hit a relatively modest, infestation of blackgrass. Still looked like there's a good crop of wheat there, and the yield just nosedive. You could be down 2, 3, 4 tons. It was quite feasible to lose half the yield with blackgrass, and that is still when there's plenty of wheat there. So I was alerted to it. Just how I wouldn't have known how devastating it was, otherwise.
Well, that's what we're looking to do as part of the project. That because I mean, actually, although we know blackgrass is a problem, we don't have a particularly granular idea of exactly how it is. So I bet you can't tell me exactly what your weed population is or how it varies through the field.
No.
That's what we're hoping to do as part of the project, and also give people an idea of what the effect of various things that they're going to do, what the prediction is on their blackgrass, not the blackgrass, all grass weeds, looking specifically at non-chemical control. Because what's interesting about our survey, so it's great that you've got more than 80% of your control is non-chemical. What our survey found that most people, about 43%, reckon that less than 20% of what they're doing is non-chemical. So most of their control, more than 80% of their control is down to the chemistry they're using. And as we know, that's losing its reliability.
Yep.
We are getting more and more greater tolerance and resistance
Yep.
coming through chemistry, more chemicals being removed from the armory. And you need to get more than 95% control in order to actually win the battle against these grass weeds. So if you're, I mean, you're probably, so if chemistry suddenly ended tomorrow, you would, with the controls that you've got, would hopefully be somewhere, you'd keep your head above water. Those people who are 80% reliant on chemistry, they just lose the battle altogether. Never mind what now.
Yeah, I mean, for us, there's, my strategy is quite clear now. I think I know what it is. It's first of all drainage, field drainage, molding, because that's where the black grassed areas are, where your drainage isn't right. And we've actually been using, my brother's got a 360, and we've got a special sort of slot bucket. And we've been going into areas where we've got problems. This has been shown up really through trying no-till. We've realised where our wet areas are really wet, and when we've gone through areas that were drained in the 1970s, it was supposed to have porous backfill. We found all sorts of things haven't been done, and put in porous backfill, put a proper drain in, mould it properly. We built our own mould plough, which incorporates subsoiler legs if you want them. Just going back to the basics of drainage, and surprise, surprise, the water goes and you get on top of the black grass. And then the other thing is rotation, spring cropping, just using every little thing you can, cleanliness of the combines, patch spraying, or done a lot of that over the years. If you've got black grass, don't put it for the combine. It just, just asking for trouble. So so.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm keen to move on to your next topic, by the way. Time's rattling on. We could carry on talking about until the cows come in. But the next one you said was about the soil biome, I believe. So tell me more about this, Charles.
Right. Well, this is really triggered by my interest for my own personal health through the Zoe platform, which is a work undertaken by a team led by Professor Tim Spector, who was a specialist in epigenetics and the twins trials. And he started examining the variations between twins and what this was. And this has led him to do work on the human biome, the bacterial family universe that live in our lower gut, which has been seen as increasingly more important with the development of new technologies. I think they call it shotgun metagenomics. They're able to work out just exactly what we've got in there, or not exactly, but to a reasonably accurate degree. And I became part of sort of citizen science, which is what BOFIN is interested in, which is why I'm interested with BOFIN, in finding out about myself. And I found out about my blood sugar response, my blood lipid control, and also what kind of bacteria and things I had in my lower intestine by doing stool samples, and done that twice now and altered my diet. And I've learned that we can make changes and we can improve things, make things more beneficial. And I see direct correlation to farming. It's a similar thing, and I think we will find that there is a link between soil biodiversity, soil biome health, and ourselves. And really, it's all about the biology. And the more we understand about that, the better. So I've spent a lot of time looking into this. I have my own microscope that I've played around with. I don't really know anything, but I know that my soil is pretty comprehensively deficient in fungal life. I've done trying things with composting, Johnson Sue extracts, things like that. So anything like that has been my own personal interest. And so, from that, I think we need to be working a lot better, or a lot more comprehensively on soil biodiversity. We know things we can do to improve soil health, and we need to really put a lot of effort into this now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's interesting to hear. The relationship, or the sort of correlation, if you like, between the human microbiome and the soil microbiome. And we are understanding quite a lot, as I understand, about the human microbiome. But we still know so little what goes on in our soil. So, but you took part in our project last year, our soil fungal communities project, where we were looking at specifically arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. So this project came about from Tom Thurkle from the Crop Science Centre in Cambridge, who's been looking at the relationship, the plant signalling pathways that govern this relationship that all crops have, or most crops. Oilseed rape, for one, doesn't have this relationship with mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, and it is controlled by the host plant, but it is a symbiotic relationship. They pass, so that the mycorrhizal fungi passes nutrients from the soil into the crop, and the crop passes carbon down into the mycorrhizal fungi. It's very much a symbiotic relationship, been going on for 400 million years, I think. Is one of nature's oldest relationship.
Definitely.
So Tom's been doing work on this really interesting cutting edge science on this as part of a wider project with the Crop Science Centre. But he wanted to know what the range was across UK soils, just to put his particular trial into perspective. And so he said, would BOFIN members like to help? And Charles, you were one of many farmers who stepped up to the mark and said, yes, please. So we sent you out packs and instructions on on how to measure your roots. You dug up some roots, cleaned them off, you prepared them, and then you sent them back in a special pack. And you were one of 41 farmers who took part. And Charles, we did send you your results, but I understand it obviously got lost in the email or whatever.
The trash bin, I expect.
So this is now the great reveal, and I can tell you, Charles, that your sample came in, and so you have within your sample, within your roots, within that. Oh, what was that wheat crop? Was it X days or Skyfall?
Yes, yeah.
X days.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
A first wheat crop, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Are you direct drilling?
Yes, I am. That crop was, yes. Yeah.
Right. Now, the result was 27% mycorrhizal colonization in the root.
Not great.
Well, hold your horses there. So Tom was expecting, it's about middle of the road. So we had 41 samples sent in. Tom was expecting between 20 and 40% mycorrhizal colonization. What we actually got was, get this, between 5 and 69%. So he was staggered by the range. It really is a big range. And especially those high samples we got in. And I have to say, it's the people who are direct drilling, especially the Regen farmers, with cover crops and things like that, who are performing highest from the data that we received. And no surprises, those people who are deep tillage, conventional farmers, are towards the lower end of the spectrum. But it also comes down to your wheat crop as well. So I mean, we had a sample with we sampled KWS, their varieties. They very kindly supported along with RAGT. So we sampled some of their variety screen, where the only difference was the varieties. And it turned out that across their varieties, there was a threefold increase in mycorrhizal colonization. So KWS X days was right up the top, actually. It has quite a high association, whereas palladium was down the bottom. The way Tom describes it is that palladium doesn't feel like it needs the support from the mycorrhizal fungi, which is quite interesting to think about it. So, so what do you think from those results I've given you, Charles? Where do you think you stand with your mycorrhizal fungi?
Two things. First of all, I've been doing regenerative practices and no-till, particularly no-till, for a relatively short period of time. So a lot of the farm, this is only about the third time we've drilled without tillage or with much reduced tillage. So we're early days. I do know from my own investigations that there isn't a lot of fungal life in the soil. The second thing, from saying what you were saying and talking about other plants and their association with mycorrhizal fungi. That was wheat after rape. So after the rape, you might say, well, it kind of figures, but I'm not at all surprised, and I think this is one area where I think regenerative farming scores highly. As it's, the more diverse, the less disruptive, the sort of basic tenets. I mean, if you read someone like Gabe Brown's book, there's half a dozen sort of tenets, central tenets of the idea, and lack of disturbance, or call it what you will, is a key component. And I think I was listening to something only this morning, and the amount of the length of fungal hyphae filaments in just a teaspoon of soil can extend more than 10 kilometers. So if you're if you're smashing it down, exposing it to the wind and sun, etc., go figure, really. It's not difficult.
That's interesting you say that. I mean, one of the aspects of this, that funnily enough, we had 4 organic farmers within the survey. And they had some of the best results, not the best, I might add. But interestingly, most of them ploughed, but the plough results were actually quite good. But we think that's because they were the organic ones. So, I mean, obviously, the data sets in both cases are very small, so we shouldn't put too much confidence on it. But anecdotally, they do say that, okay, so when you plough, you obviously disrupt the mycorrhizal fungi community. But the thing is if you're ploughing into a very healthy soil anyway, you don't disrupt it quite as much as you might think. I guess it recovers quickly. Is what they say anecdotally. I mean, we can't pull that out from the trial results, but that's what people say. So those people who religiously don't plough because because of this very fact, then that's fine. But actually, the figures seem to suggest that as long as you've got a healthy soil, then a certain amount of disruption the soil can recover from.
Yes.
But really interesting results. Now, I hope you're going to want to get involved in our new project that you may have heard about. Have you heard about Truth at all?
I have heard. Yeah, I've heard you on one of the links on X. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So this is Thriving Roots Underpinning Total Soil Health. It's a project that we've just got underway. We've got 4 partners we're working with: University of Nottingham and John Innes Centre. Chap also involved in this, and PES, of course, PES Technologies, and PES has got this fascinating new soil sensor that actually smells the soil, so it can tell from the volatiles that the soil gives off what its signature is. It smells its sort of the signature of the soil. Now, at the moment, they can quite accurately tell certain things about the soil. Its mineral, not mineral content, the nutrient content and things like that. Certain aspects about that. But what we're looking to develop through the project is a keen idea of the microbiome within the soil. And so we're, alongside doing, testing the sensor, we're going to be sending samples in for DNA analysis so that we can accurately, correlate the two and calibrate, if you like, this sensor. We know from previous work that this sensor does, pick up these volatiles, and it does vary depending on the microbiome analysis. This is about actually being able to translate that into hard facts and figures. So, I mean, this is a sensor that's currently sort of the prototype stage. But by the end of the project, 3-year project, we hope that it will be commercially available, and that these tests you'll be able to get for a reasonable cost a really, really detailed analysis of your soil is one of, and that's just one aspect that we're looking at in this. We're also going to be looking at root architecture. So this is why Nottingham are involved, and they do this really cool things with they take soil cores from your crop, and they can turn it into these 3D images of your soil rooting. So we're going to be doing that.
Yeah.
And we're looking for root rangers to be
Yeah.
involved in this. So that's going to be up to 30 farmers who will be paid to do the monitoring in these trials and work with Nottingham and with John Innes Centre. We've also got some really interesting wheat varieties that John Innes Centre have been looking at. So they've been looking at landrace varieties and also some durum wheats and things like that that have got some interesting rooting characteristics, either structure or biological nitrification inhibition, which increases nitrogen use efficiency. That's a natural quality that some plants have, especially some wheats, but it's largely a property that's been lost from our modern wheats. But it found it in some old landrace varieties. It's those that we're going to be multiplying up and looking at in this platform. So this is a really fascinating project.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
So I hope you're going to be involved in that.
No, I'll be interested.
No, we'll keep a lookout for that, and also any other BOFIN members listening, keep a lookout for Truth. We're going to be launching it we're launching it at a webinar on the 14th of February. And as I say this, I suddenly think I'm horrible feeling that actually this goes out after the 14th of February. So apologies if that's the case. But we're also having an event. Are you going to the low carbon event on the 6th of March, Charles?
I believe I am penciled in to do that, yes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we hope that you will see you there because we're hiring a room and we're hoping that as many of our members will come along as possible. And that's where we're going to be. We've got the guys from Nottingham, John Innes Centre and from PES who'll be there. We'll actually have the PES sensor. We'll have the guys from Nottingham who will be able to demonstrate their soil cores and what they look at in the soil as well. And there'll be some lunch as well. We'll be laying on some lunch. And then in the afternoon, Charles, there's going to be a review of the slimers. The first data back, hopefully, where then Keith will have analysed the data and we'll have some results back from that. So a day definitely to put in your diary and look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, listen, there's another topic that we've got to discuss, and I'm sorry about this. We've been going on for far too long, but I'm very keen to know about your last topic that you wanted to talk about, and just remind us again what that was.
So that was more sustainable farming, really, looking to enhance diversity and natural capital. Do more from what we've got already, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, it's quite a point of discussion at the moment, this, Charles. I mean, what's your motivation for improving the natural capital on your farm?
Well, obviously, the headlines are all about carbon. That debate is going on throughout farming, recording it, who owns it, what do we do with it. I'm not so sure quite about that side, monetising it. Some people are monetising it already. But what I do know is that from the agronomy, from the health of the environment, everything really, so much we can offer. We're in control of 70% of the land, water quality, air quality. And if you look at it, a lot of it comes back to really enhancing the diversity of our farming systems, and that's really a landscape scale biodiversity project that if we all contribute to it and move it whatever way we can towards it, it will have positive benefits on so many fronts. It really is. The possibilities are almost endless, and it's a very exciting time, I think, for agriculture. I just think it's a pity that certain aspects of it get hijacked and it becomes all about that. But I mean, human health, one of my particular things. But I mean, we've got to do something about it. It's quite clear that the kind of current human nutrition isn't doing us any good, and we don't understand it. And I'm a grandfather, and you look at the young generations, and I do fear for them. You can see already, and I mean, some of the stuff I've seen is, in people already in their 30s and early 40s, there's worrying signs that they are already heading towards, devastating health effects, and that farming actually is at the bottom of all this, and how we manage the soil and the environment is really at the bottom of it all.
Yeah, no, that's really. I like the way you associate, as you did earlier. The gut microbiome with the soil microbiome, and here we're talking about human health and your well-being and so on, and what you've gained from the countryside. That's all down to the natural capital that farmers provide, I suppose. And it's a really nice link there, isn't it, between human health and our natural environment.
Yeah. Very much important. Yeah.
Listen, which that's all we've got time for, Charles. But it's been a we could talk all day, absolutely, and it's been such a privilege to talk to you, and it's always enjoyable to catch up.
Fantastic.
And obviously, we'll look forward to seeing you on the 6th of March at the Low Carbon Agricultural event. And thank you all, everybody else, for listening and for catching up again on another BOFIN Buzz episode. We'll be back soon with another episode, so look out for the next one. But in the meantime, thank you all. Thank you, first of all, obviously, to Charles, and thank you all for listening. And so goodbye. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm 99% uploaded at the moment.